Mark just needs to unmute.
And that's us unmuted.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Holford. I'm an AACG member, a collector based in the UK, and I think you've seen my collection before. Today is the 12th of November, and I am a collector, particularly of Richard Jackson and Sally Fawkes, who you're going to hear today. Their talk is entitled "You, Me, and Us," and I will talk a bit about that in a minute. So I'm now going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to show you the pieces of theirs that I have, and I probably have more work by them than any other artists. So let me just, I'm hoping this is going to, yeah. Now this is a screen you may well have seen before because I gave a talk about my own collection, but I have changed a bit since then because I've acquired this rather nice, in the same auction, bizarrely, this Lino and another piece of Monica Guggisberg and Philip Baldwin, and they make a beautiful pair. They're unbelievably the same shape and the same size, but that's not what we're here for. I just thought I'd quickly show you that there are a few of my Richard and Sally pieces, which I've sort of ringed here, but they're not all there. They are scattered around my house. And there are a few more, and I'm going to take you on a little tour of those. There are some on these shelves, which is principally where most of my collection is, but they're also scattered around my living room and elsewhere in the house. So how did I first meet Richard and Sally? Well, I think it's about 20 years ago nearly, and they'll correct me if I'm wrong. I was trying to commission a chandelier for the bottom of my stairs, and I'd been rather unsuccessful about this until I got this phone call, which said, can we come around and see you? Because we think we might be able to help you. So I said, all right, come round and have a drink at 6 o'clock one evening, because I was working in those days. And they came round and they sort of took a look at the bottom of my stairs and my hall, which was quite like what you see here. It's taken from standing on the stairs. And they went away and they came back 2 weeks later and they said, you don't want a chandelier, you want an installation. I said, what do you mean I want an installation? They said, leave it to us. So they then went away and I think they gave me a price, and I said, oh, well, that sounds all right. I'll get on with it. And this is what I got. And they'll talk a bit about this during their presentation, but it's about the theatre, because my wife and I are involved in opera, and I'll come back to that in a minute because they've been a key part of that. We used to run an opera festival in the south of France, and this is all about the theatre, the curtains in a theatre, and the shadows that these cast on the walls. And funnily enough, we've moved house since then. This picture is in our current house, and you'll see one later on. It actually casts rather better shadows in this house because we downsized and the corridor is narrower. So, but when we came, Sally said to me, well, actually, she looked around the house and she said, well, actually, you've got a piece of my work already. And I purchased this in the Victoria and Albert Museum because in those days, they used to sell art glass in the museum. Sadly, they don't do that anymore. So here are a few of the pieces that I have, and we'll talk, they'll talk, well, in fact, I'm going to show you them all. This is a piece by Richard, which is a spirit house, and he will talk about his spirit houses and this, I suppose, is about just over a foot tall and about 9 inches wide. And I love the piece, it's fantastic. This is almost my latest piece by Sally, which she'll also talk about, with one exception, which I'll come on to, but this is very typically, to my mind, but colored and mirrored piece by her. And then this is a fantastic piece by Richard, which is rather, in some ways, quite unlike many of the pieces he does, particularly because of its color. And then this is another, both of these are about 9 inches, perhaps the piece at the bottom, which is by Sally, is a bit bigger. Then a few other pieces. These are quite small. This is Sally, and I think this is sort of joint between them. And I was given that as a present by somebody who commissioned it off them to give me for something I'd done for them. So these are quite small. I mean, the piece on the right is probably 4 inches across, as is the piece on the left, and the piece at the bottom is about 6 inches, 7 inches long. Now, I just want to touch on relationships for a moment. This is not by them, and for those of you who are probably quite knowledgeable, this is actually a Colin Reid. So why should I have Colin Reid here? Well, Sally was a studio assistant with him to start with. And in Stroud, which is where you'll see their current workshop is, and they live very close to Colin now. And in fact, their first studio was very near his. And so there's a sort of, I always think this is a sort of family relationship, because this piece is by a woman called Nina McGarver, who is just beginning to make a name for herself. And in fact, I think she's being exhibited by Habitat in Florida at the moment. She's definitely what you might describe as up and coming. And this is a piece she made because she, her sister, bizarrely, unbeknownst to us, worked for us in the Opera Festival in the south of France, which is where we used to run it. And then quite independently, I knew that she had a glassmaking sister, but Nina worked as an assistant, both for actually Philip and Monica. And then I think she then moved on to Richard and Sally, but it might be the other way around. And she worked as an assistant for them. And now she's making a name for herself. So I sort of see this almost as a family relationship. Colin, the grandfather, Richard and Sally in the middle as the parents, and sort of Nina as the daughter. But it's an amazing sort of, some senses there are some amazing connections here, and I'm greatly about connections. And the Opera Festival sort of leads me to this, which we had a singing competition every year, and I commissioned glassmakers to make a prize each year for the winner. And these are the two made by Richard and Sally for 2 years. They've been to the festival. Their daughter, Amy, who we talked about as we were waiting, who I'm amazed is now 16. She was part of the festival, and they were a key sort of part of our relationship. And we've done many things together we've also, the three of us, along with a woman who you may know called Catherine Coleman, who is one of Britain's leading, if not the leading, glass engraver, together used to run a charity, or was part of a charity sale, which raised about $150,000 each year. And our last year, we sold $60,000 worth of glass in the last 3 years each year. And that was an amazing achievement. And Richard and Sally were a key part of that. Also, when they came to the festival, Sally met a young composer, and she has made a video, which sort of she'll touch on when she comes to her experiences about being in the Arctic. And they've made a video together, which was, if you like, an artistic collaboration, which came out of working or coming to our opera festival. So there have been many touch points. And aside from these commissions, they've also done other commissions for me. So we have a very long time relationship going back over 20 years. And finally, as they have entitled it You, Me and Us, I call it His, Hers and Theirs. So this is his. This is quite early piece of Richard's, which I acquired probably quite near the beginning of our relationship together. This is hers, and this is really recent. And Sally will talk about the origins of this during her presentation. And then this is theirs, which is a combination of Sally's mirroring and Richard's deep cutting. So on that note, I think I will hand over to you, Richard and Sally, and leave you to it. So I think I probably have to stop sharing. And
we need to share, don't we now?
We made it.
Yeah, screen share. So here, okay. So I'm just going to put that onto slideshow. Okay, so thank you very much for having us.
Good evening, all.
Talk to you. It's really nice to be able to talk to you about our work, and as Mark introduced the connections there. So as you know, You, Me and Us, it's because we both make solo work, but we also collaborate. And obviously, you know, there are people who collaborate but and work together, but doing all three, I think, is possibly fairly unusual.
Yeah, a lot of people do collaborate, but they also have very distinctive roles. And one of the ways we collaborate is we don't have those distinctive roles. We cross over a lot in all aspects.
And in the making of a piece of work, we will do every stage all the way through. So this is us in our studio. This is our usual get up, our grinding gear, and then that's us working together there in the background. So our studio is in Stroud, and it's part of an old mill, historic landmark along the Golden Valley, and has been there since 1608.
Now, inside the studio, we've actually had the studio now for a year longer than our daughter is old. We've had it for 17 years, and we've worked really hard in there because we realised very early on that we spend more time in the studio than we do at home, and so we wanted to really develop a nice studio that we would enjoy working in. So
so anyway, so we have one side of the studio that's pretty much dedicated to the modelling and the kiln area, and then on the other side we have our cold working and office display area. So this is an example of you, me, and us. So
on the left-hand side there's myself, and in the middle is a collaboration, and on the far side is a Sally Fawkes. So in our collaborative work, we generally name it as Jackson Fawkes. So we make work for exhibition and to commission. So on the left here, you'll see this piece was made for Salisbury Cathedral, an exhibition called Reflection. And on the right there, a commission for a cruise ship. It was one of Saga Cruise Lines, and it was their first and largest state-of-the-art ship, and it's in their sort of reception bar area. So we also make work for private, corporate and public spaces. So on the left here, this is in a private garden. And what was lovely about this commission was that the garden was designed around our sculpture, and it won an award for the garden design. And in the middle, there's this was in a hotel in London. And then on the right, there's a project that I had commissioned to make a large outside piece for a museum in Woking in the UK. So we have work in a number of national collections. They're all labelled up there, but this is just a selection again of you, me, and us. Exactly. So we both have taught during our whole sort of time of working with glass, but I still teach. Richard doesn't really do it so much anymore. No. I teach at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts on the island of Bornholm in Denmark. And I've been doing that for 17 years now, and I love going out there to teach. And in fact, I'm going next week, so I'm looking forward to that again. So the questions that we often get asked, as I'm sure any glassmaker does, why did you both choose glass as your material for expression, and how did we both get into working with glass? So I'll start with me here. I always knew art was going to be my thing in some form, and I went and did my foundation studies in art and design, and that's sort of I don't know if it's the same in the States, but it's a general course in art and design. And I did a lot of drawing. It was quite a formal training, and I did a lot of work drawing out and about around the town. And then after that, I wasn't sure what material I wanted to work with. So I went to London and worked for another 7 years. I ended up working in the fashion trade. I worked in buying and merchandising, and the top left there is one of the last ranges of clothes I worked on, which was sold in Harvey Nichols and Principles. And then I got to a point where I really didn't want to be part of the cycle of fast fashion. And this is me. I'd just been on a trip to Africa for a few weeks, and I came back and I thought, oh, I really want to be doing something else. And I had in fact found glass in the British Museum, and this piece of glass here displayed here is the light bulb moment for me that glass is what I want to do. I think everyone thought I was nuts when I left my job, but that's what I did. And then Richard, before you went to study? I had a fairly different initial introduction, but I think a very usual one for a lot of people, in that I was on holiday one time and I saw some glass being blown, and I fell in love with it as a material. I was absolutely fascinated, completely hooked. And then it just became a question of finding out how I could do it myself. My initial start was working with stained glass, and the 6 images that you can see along the top here was my very first commission. It's a stained glass, a series of 6 stained glass windows around a bay window. And that is the actual glass there, photographed. But in terms of inspiration and working, I've always drawn in one form or another. I've always been very interested in photography, and these contact prints of some photographs that I have taken are some of the very first pieces of glass I made on my first glass course.
Okay, so we both graduated from the same college, but about a decade apart. And we thought it might be interesting for you to see some of our work that we made in our final year at college. So this is Richard in the 80s and I was in the 90s.
That's right, yeah.
That is right, isn't it? Yeah.
Sounds a long time ago now. So that's where we came from. That's where we both were when we finished our 3-year degree courses.
Okay, so we both found the process that has totally by coincidence in terms of timing that has sort of become our individual expressions. And for me, it's using hand silvering or mirroring on 3-dimensional forms. And for Richard,
is using a handheld diamond saw and carving into the glass in terms of shaping and surface notational sort of movement and markings. And both of us found this way of our ways of working just prior to us setting up our first proper glass studio,
which was in 2000.
Yeah,
2000. Yeah. Okay, so one of the questions as well is, what is our work about? And in broad terms, we are inspired by observations of the world and the complexities within it. I mean, modern life and everything, all that information just coming at you. And I think that's been constant ever since the beginning, but we've come at it from different directions. We find our collaborative work, we bring our individual voices together and somehow they work, don't they? It melds together.
Yeah.
And so we sort of, our sculptures raise questions and hopefully observations made in new.
Go on.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say that was a little piece of on the previous slide. That was just a bit of prose that I wrote that was part of the exhibition in Salisbury, and this is a view. Hang on, because this is a detailed view of one of the pieces that was in that big Salisbury Cathedral exhibition.
So this is the piece, just to give you some more ideas here. And you can see that the 2 people there, they're looking through, and the idea is that your perceptions might be changed. And as you can see here, the glass, with the way of the optics work, it takes you off into an imaginary world or a different direction to the one that you were expecting.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second, just to go back to the previous slide? For the benefit of those who perhaps are not too keen on centimeters, if you divide roughly by 2, you get a centimeter.
Sorry.
So 244 is about 120 inches long, or
it's about 8 feet.
10 feet. So yeah.
Okay, so we often work ideas through on different scales, and this is an example of a piece where we developed the work that we did for the cathedral in another way, and we were very fortunate to hear that this piece is sold this week in London, and it is in fact going across the pond to New York. So that was quite nice this week. Okay, so we both have our individual ways of working, but we also have similar approaches, and of course sharing a studio, we also use a lot of the same tools, but often in very different ways, don't we?
So the 2 bottom pictures, both Sally and I there are using the saw to work the pieces of glass. But where I'm working, as you can see, I'm working a flat piece of glass. This is prior to it being slumped and formed in the kiln, whereas Sally is working on a cast piece there. But at the same time, both of us cross over and we both do the same thing now. What we found is, as we've started to collaborate more and more, we've crossed over in the ways we are working more. It's been able to help to free us up.
So both of us do 2D explorations, and so what we thought we would do is I'll talk a bit about my work, and I've chosen a few examples of work to talk about. Richard will do the same. We've both chosen a career highlight, and then we'll talk about our collaborative work. So I tend to do a lot of drawing when I'm traveling, when I'm out and about. I used to kind of worry about, oh, why am I drawing this? But now I just think if it interests me, draw it, make a note of it. And you find that these things, just what you see, just keeps coming back into your work. So this commission that I had, Transient Air, is we also make outdoor work. And that's something we've become known for in the UK for the work that we make in the outdoors. So this commission was for a pond, and
in a small stately home.
Yeah, in a small stately home. Sorry, I always forget to say that. But the valley is amazing, and the air currents. You can see all of the wildlife travelling along the air currents. And I didn't find out until after I'd done the commission that apparently during the war it was used by Australian Air Force, and Concorde flies over it. And there's just all these sort of associations which I'd sort of picked up, I think, just from the place that fed into the piece. So when we're working to commission, very often this is my little maquette here, if you can see, my little mock-up of the pool and the pieces of glass, and then here making the life-size model, going to visit, and then you can see here inside the glass, what I also did was I made the glass go into the mold, so you've got this sort of sense of contours and maps within the pieces there. So that piece was actually probably about a decade ago now, but this is a more recent piece called Plotting Dimensions. And for me, this was sort of responding to the idea that humanity might spread out into the universe and might find its way to other planets.
So that's about, oh, it's difficult, isn't it? No, that's about.
No, it's actually a bit bigger than that.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, because that one's not converted either.
Okay, so here's a short video of this piece to show you in more detail. So as you can see, I've got a lens there, and it's mirrored and polished, so you've got the reflection of the mirror because you've also got a mirror behind, but the lines are also those sort of, how would you navigate, how would you plot your charts into different dimensions. So we use our tools in such a way that we're always looking for how we can use them to sort of create the ideas that we want to. Oh, sorry, I always do that. Okay, so this piece of mine has actually been selected for the Coburg Prize for Contemporary Glass next year. Now, Diane had asked me to explain a bit about that in case people don't know, but the Coburg Prize is for any professional artist who was born or is currently working in Europe. Now, they can only submit one-off pieces as well. So they have to be unique pieces, and there are 100 artworks selected, and I think it's possibly about 75 artists that have been selected.
And it's probably the primary European prize, isn't it?
Yes. And here's a piece to show you, because I think it really helps with these pieces to actually understand how it, because you've got the mirror is moving constantly as you're moving around the piece. So it's like this sort of mercurial sort of lake that you can see moving around the piece there. These are really tricky to make, these pieces. They're very rewarding when you get to the end, but sometimes you think, oh, will I ever get to the end of making this? Okay, this is a couple more pieces in the series. So this series, I've actually made 20 pieces in, so every single one will be unique in some way. So I do have a few molds that I might use as my starting points, but then I will adapt them. I'll cut them differently. I'll have a different number of indentations into the pieces, different colors on the outside.
So these are 2 and 4. How many have you made since?
There's 20 in total so far.
Over what period of time?
I think the first one was my experiment on this was possibly 2016.
Oh, quite short compared with some of your things you've done.
Okay, so this is a little video about the making of them. So I often research at sea around the Norway's Arctic coast. So when I go there, I'm experiencing how the elements all come together and mix up, and that sort of being on the sort of edge of comfort and discomfort.
Visually, it's a really different experience sailing up around the Norwegian coast.
And this is what inspired your collaboration with the composer that I talked about in the beginning.
Okay, this is just to give you an idea of the tall ship that I sailed on. So I'm actually a crew member when I'm there too, and sometimes it's very cold, but it's amazing experience. And this piece, as you will have seen earlier, Mark Holford has this piece. So I will often use my observations and bring them together within a piece. So I always refer to them as not being time specific, but being associative. So I hope that they will sort of trigger thought processes for the people that are viewing them. Now, so my career highlight that I've chosen to talk about is I was asked by Muse Vert in France, Sas-Poterie, to do a residency exploring the local area. So this museum here is another one of the, would you say probably one of the most important European glass museums. It's like multi-million euro museum, and
it's a brand new building, only just built.
But you need to be pretty adventurous to get there, because it's sort of rather off the beaten track in northern France. But the other thing, I think important thing is, which you'll probably touch on, is that it's very close to the battlefields in northern France.
Yes, yes. But it only has a population of 1,500 in the village where this museum is. So when I went there, I did a lot of research around, and I also did some workshops with local children. So I was exploring the local landscape, looking at how the past has influenced how the present is, and how that will also influence the future, and how the sort of whole aura of the place makes you feel and how you interact with it. So it was a really intense period of 3 months working. And what I did was, I knew that I wanted to sort of try as many new ideas as possible. So I was making work, getting it as far as I could, thinking, I know I can finish that when I go home. So I went back several times with the car absolutely jam-packed full of all of the work that I was going to finish at home in the studio. So I also went out and took some mouldings from around the village as well. And this became a very important, this little tie bar end here became a very important element in my exhibition. So I'm just talking briefly about one of the pieces that I made, and to show you, I made a glass hopscotch. It was about those sort of links to people's past, the nostalgia, the memories, and also the fact that the hopscotch was played a lot by the kids who also worked in the factory from about 5 years old with their parents. Just been making it here. And then also
Let's explain about the factory, because I'm not sure you've touched on the, you know.
Sorry, Mark, can you say that again?
What the origins of Sas-Poterie was in the glass industry.
Yeah. So I trimmed that bit out after our run through. Yeah, so the factory was the ceramics and glass, as you the area that the Sas-Poterie would indicate, was the industry that held the village together, or it grew in the industrial area era. So there's no longer glass factories or ceramic factories there anymore, but of course the glass material is very precious to the museum. So the glass makers were able to make out of hours glass, which they couldn't sell, but they could gift it or they could keep it. And they also used to make these glets, which they're called glets, the counters for playing hopscotch. And the children used to sort of want to be in a competition to have the best one. So of course, if they broke them, their parents could just make them some more. So the museum was set up by a priest who came to the area and saw all of these fantastic after hours glass and decided they should be preserved. And that's where the museum started in the 1950s. And it has just grown and grown since then to become one of the major museums collecting contemporary glass in Europe. So this is a larger piece that I worked on in the that became part in the exhibition. So at the end of my residency, I went on to have a solo show at the museum.
And this was quite, although Sally had both of us using engraving and mark making a lot, this was actually a big move on for you, moving it up to this sort of scale.
Yeah. Quite a leap of faith I took in myself to make this piece, I think. But this is a 1-minute video of the exhibition. So, I mean, they're fantastic exhibition halls, and this was a great time for me to actually be able to work with an exhibition designer and really have the whole exhibition thought out and how it would work. So as you can see, the mirror still features very heavily in my work. I don't seem to ever be able to get away from it. I think I just need to relax and just say that's me. So this was a new way of working for me, actually using, working on the flat glass, which is something I had been, I'd experimented a little bit with at college, but hadn't really had time to go there. So this was a really good point. So it's amazing that it can take you more than 20 years to get to the point where you have time to work through some of the ideas that you might have that you can work within the material. So this is Mark's piece here. Oh, yeah, this one here. So that was actually from the landscape, and that was where on the border between Belgium and France, where some of the battles of World War I were.
This one, that.
Yeah, and actually if I just go, no, that last piece there, that was actually bought by a museum across the border in Belgium, and she said it absolutely speaks to me of the landscape and how it's scarred by the effects of the war.
I would 100% endorse that, and I think what really interested me was for you was the change in your style and the development, because I challenged you before to do something really different, and I think this was a huge leap in doing something different.
Yeah, it's certainly something I'm still going to explore, time permitting.
Okay, so I also work in 2D, but in a very different way to Sally. Sometimes it's a very, like this sketch here is very quick sketch laying down of an idea of something that might well become a piece of work, piece of glass sculpture. But I also just draw completely from the imagination, and both of these two here are done using ink. And although you can't really tell from an image on a screen, but these are built up in multiple layers of ink, and between 30 and 40 layers of ink in some of the areas there.
Can I chip in there? I get an original ink drawing every year for my birthday and for Valentine's Day, don't I?
Lucky you. And then I've always been fascinated with vessels, which comes, I think, initially from my initial interest being blowing and working with the vessel form. And so this is just a sort of a fun idea of something that would be quite interesting and to create. Maybe I could cast it actually now and work it through that way, but as a form of a vessel. So me working with my sort of specialist tool, if you like, the saw, in several different ways. Here, working roughly to take the first shaping from a cast. This is some finishing carving on a small piece, and then this is me doing some carving on a collaborative piece, which was our first one, which went to Australia, I believe, as a commission. Right, to Mark's commission here, this was the start of a long and very happy friendship with Mark Holford and co. But Mark was great in that when his initial idea was he wanted to commission a contemporary chandelier, and when I saw the situation where he wanted it, I thought it would be so exciting to try something that actually travelled down the hall and was a sort of a multiple chandelier, if you like. And so this was my first opportunity to create something that had multiple pieces that were potentially movable.
I was just laughing about when we installed it as well.
Balancing on the top of ladders.
Yeah.
My friends think this is a sort of guillotine, and I'm sure you overcharged me, didn't you?
Undercharged,
yeah, won't respond to that one.
Actually, I have to say, to be serious about it, you delivered it on budget, on time, and as for a first effort, I think that's to be absolutely congratulated. I've had a completely opposite experience, as you know, with one person who was a complete disaster on the same basis. So I was delighted.
Not us. Okay, so as Sally mentioned earlier, we both work in series, and these series can. Oh, I didn't say about the drawing. I'm very quickly going to scoot back a couple of slides. Now, this drawing here is a drawing from life, and this was when I was traveling in Southeast Asia, and this was a family shrine within a family compound, and that was about a half a day's worth of drawing while I was traveling there. So now scoot back to where we were, and that was part of the inspiration that resulted in this series, and it was about 10 or 12 years between doing that original drawing and the traveling in Bali in Southeast Asia there, and the beginning of this series which is called Spirit House. And there are various different Spirit House there. These are schematic sort of ideas of representations, and I think you can probably just about see that this piece here actually resulted in that cast there. And
you saw, yeah, that's right. I was going to say you saw one in my initial.
That's right, the one in Mark's collection, which is a particular favourite of mine. 3 more. These ones are larger scale of the ones that were in the previous slide. And then this is a series of mine called Triune, which was actually incredibly difficult to do, very difficult pieces to make, but very much worth it. And I won the Worshipful Company of Glass Sellers Award in 2007 with this piece. And here's a little part of the process of making. I like to model in wet sand. So that's the initial model there.
I think when you were young, you used to be on the beach with a bucket and spade. Is that right?
He is now.
I still am.
Now.
Yeah, absolutely. Digging big holes and making big piles and shaping sand. All part of life.
With water filling up the moat.
Right.
Castles in the sand.
Great British holiday.
And then, so this is the glass having just been cast, and as you can see, I've just started to break away the mold there, so you can see how the glass first comes out here before it's actually started to be worked on, and me working through the piece. Now, this is not something I do very often. I don't make a habit of this, but it was the only way I could get up to polish the very tip of this piece.
You're not polishing there though, are you?
No, that's actually smoothing.
Okay,
I had to do it with polishing as well.
Yeah.
But it was the very difficult piece to make. That
How long did it Richard, how long did it take you to make?
Well, the actual cold work, because it was so demanding, and I just had to keep on stopping and stepping back and resting a little bit as well. In total, I think the cold work took me about 3 months on the first ones that I made of this. I got a little bit quicker. I've only made 4 in this series, I believe.
So far, yeah. It's only going to go back to, isn't it?
Yeah.
But someone did actually say to Richard, he said, can't believe that you actually go through all the process of making this piece perfectly polished, and then you go at it with a saw. He said, how do you actually have the nerve to do that? So you are quite brave like that, aren't you?
Yeah, it's very, when you've spent literally days and days polishing and cold working a piece, it's really nerve-wracking to get going with the saw.
I always think it looks like a moon rocket.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, in a sort of fantastic Marvel comic or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember Thunderbirds? There was Thunderbird 3. That was a bit like that, but it's actually,
Well, that's perhaps what I'm thinking about.
yeah, but it's actually a lot of the idea for Triune was based around various different creation myths. So this is another series from Past Memory, and this piece was made actually as a commission and is installed. Oh,
At the Shangri-La.
at the Shangri-La. I thought there was another slide with
No.
that, but following it. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's there next to it. And this is part of the installation process. The actual sculpture is UV bonded onto this bottom glass piece here. But of course, the shard is completely glazed. Every wall is a window on the outside. So
we should just mention the Shard is the tallest building in Europe. It's nearly 1,000 feet high, on the banks of Thames, right in the center of the city.
Yeah, but the two smaller images here is just to show how glamorous our job really is. The only room available was a lavatory, which didn't have any windows, so we could bond safely there with the UV lamp. And these are a couple more pieces from Past Memory series. They're in centimeters as well. And this is a video of the making of the One But Last piece. And now I was very lucky with this piece because an art consultant saw the image and subsequently commissioned me to make a second piece, the next piece in the series, to go with it as a pair. So this is having finished the last piece in this series that I've made, and this went out as a part of a big commission for both Sally and myself to a chalet somewhere in France.
Did someone have a question there? I don't know.
Does Marshall Levine have a question that's being asked at the moment?
How tall is the outdoor piece is the question, Mark.
Oh, the From Past Memory outdoor piece in the earlier slide is...
It's 1.8 meters. What's that in feet? About 6 feet tall.
Yeah, and the glass is about
90 a meter.
Between 8 and, yeah, so about almost 3 feet glass. Right, so this is my sort of career highlight that I've chosen to talk about. And I was commissioned through a project called Museum Maker to make an outdoor sculpture to go just about where this bench is at the moment, for the Lightbox, a museum in Woking. And part of my inspiration for the piece was particularly the indoor architecture of the museum and some of the pieces they have in their permanent collection.
Woking, by the way, is just in the suburbs of London. So just to give you an idea.
Thank you. So the process in a very brief form, initial sketch, a more formal drawing there showing how it worked, a small maquette model, and then making a full-size model in plywood, which we did take along and temporarily install in the courtyard.
That was really useful for getting to know exactly it was in the right place, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that it all worked. And then installing this is installing with the craftsman we use for fabricating our stainless steel, installing in the courtyard and popping the first glass element onto the sculpture there. And then this is the whole piece fully installed in daylight. And then this was absolutely brand new for me. The first time I got to work with light as well. So there are 5 lit elements, 3 of them working with the cast glass and the other 2 working as projected light around the sculpture. And the light is choreographed, and so it changes very gradually over the period of a number of hours.
So the idea is if you went into the museum, it would be one sort of program, wouldn't it? And as you came out, it would change. So you weren't going.
There was always a different.
It was always different.
And
Okay.
now,
So do you want to talk about this still?
well, you can bump into this. This is a large collaborative piece that Sally and I made for the outdoors, and this as well is in the same exhibition at Salisbury Cathedral.
I managed to get the feet in there. I meant to do it on the others, but I'm sorry, I didn't get time to do that today, to put the feet in as well. Okay, and this is just giving you another example of outdoor piece that we make and how the optics work. So actually a lot of our work is optical glass, isn't it?
Mm.
Okay, so this is a kind of a collaborative career highlight, really, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the largest cast in glass that we've ever done. It's 200 kilos. Now, Mark, you converted that to pounds the other day for us. That was, well,
it's about 450 pounds roughly.
Yeah.
In one cast. So this is the little maquette that we made to show the client initially, full scale model, and then
how high was the piece?
Again, that was 1.8 meters,
so
6 feet tall.
And
it was just about
just
under
over
a meter wide.
Just over 6 feet tall and just over 3 feet wide from here to here.
So when we work, we find it very useful when we're working on larger scale work in order to commission, to actually take the trouble to make the full scale models and quite often take them to site, so you really know that you're not going to have nasty surprises when you get to that point and that something is actually working, don't we? Mm. So so making the mold, it took us a day to prepare all the mold mix and the mold, and it took us 45 minutes to pour it.
A very frantic, fast moving 45 minutes.
And you remember when we'd actually poured it, we thought, oh, we've got to turn it over now, and how to get it off.
I asked you how many litres of mould mix there were, and so how much the total weight was. And the mould itself ended up, it was twice the weight of glass.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's right. And with the weight of the glass in it, the whole thing was about 650 kilos, something like that. So going through the process of getting the mould.
That's over half a ton. I mean, that's...
We actually did buy brand new special lifting gear to do this whole project.
And so this is
what you haven't said is how long it was in the mold for.
This is it. So this now is after the firing. We're starting to demold, and the glass was in the kiln firing for 4 months. So that's from that initial period. When you actually cast right at the beginning, you open the doors to make sure the glass has flowed out and it's filled the mold properly. But then you close the doors and you just hope you've got your calculations correct, because you can't open them again. You can't look at it until it's absolutely cold 4 months later.
Do you remember we were so scared to open the kiln? We said, okay, do you have the cup of tea before we open the kiln or after? At which point is the right time to have it?
I'm surprised it was cup of tea and not a glass of whiskey.
I think if we'd had a bottle of whiskey in the workshop, it would have been whiskey.
So anyway, so you did a lot of the shaping on this because it's really what Richard's very good at, isn't it? So you did that, and then this is just us
a little bit of final cleaning up work on it, and then installing.
Yeah, that was interesting. A number of conversations we had about how the installation was going to go, but actually it was brilliant.
It worked.
You can see here
so
that
smoothly.
we'd gone back previously and drilled these holes and put the bolts in, and then went back with the sculpture.
Well, we took the stainless steel base for getting the holes in the right place.
To do that first, and then went back. Well worth it to get it just right.
Yeah, and then finally the finished piece installed and living very happily in a private garden in Wiltshire.
Okay, then we thought we really should show the piece that was on the entrance image for us here. So this piece is called Contained Perspectives. It's relatively recent, isn't it, for us? But this is very much, it's got both of our trademarks of working, and I think that they just sort of shows how when we collaborate, our two ways of working just, I think, do come together in quite a unique way. It's quite different from our solo work, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then this is just to give you an example of some pieces that we currently have available. And
I think you said the middle, is the middle one still available, or is that the one, or is it slightly different, the bottom?
No, this is a different one. This is slightly smaller than the one that's just sold.
Anyway, I put it in the chat at the beginning. There is a link. It's rather a long link, so you'll have to copy and paste it. But if you find difficulty, then just email Richard and Sally, and they'll send you a copy of the PDF. It's very nicely done. There's a page of each one giving you an idea of what's available.
But if so we'd love to hear any questions from anyone now, and you can reach us on info@jacksonfawkes.com after, and also if you are on Instagram, you can see what we're up to at jacksonfawkes.com. Oh, it's not a big J though, I've just realized there's a capital J, it's a lowercase j. We're not active on posting, but we do try and keep up with it, don't we?
So people can see the new and exciting things that we're working on.
So thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it, and it'd be great if you've got some questions.
Do you want to unshare your screen so we can actually see you?
Yeah, okay, so stop sharing. Okay.
There we go.
Can you see us now?
We can, in all your glory. And you're, unlike yesterday, you're both the same size.
If we don't do that.
Exactly, all about how far. So Sally and Richard would be delighted to answer any questions any of you have. So perhaps Linda, you could unmute people so they can ask questions.
Everybody can unmute themselves if they have one, but I was wondering about that last piece that you were showing, Richard's piece that was outside. Do you not have the kind of weather that, I mean, it can hold up under freezing weather? And
yes, a lot of people say, oh, is glass all right outside in all weathers? But if you think about it, what are your windows made of? Glass. And there it's the perfect storm, if you like. You've got freezing cold weather on the outside, nice warm home on the inside, and 4 or 6 millimeters of glass deals with that. But glass is completely impervious as a material, so you don't have the same problems that you have with stone or with clay
or wood,
or wood, in that you don't get water absorbed, and so you don't get the freeze thaw danger. It's actually much more resilient than bronze, because bronze, the patination will always suffer. And we work very hard with our design of outdoor pieces as well. So we make sure we don't create any pockets that will hold water. And also all of the fixings that we use, we design and have produced by local artisans, and the ways of working, because you never want to have glass and metal touching directly together. So you always have a softer material in between. and the bond that we use for holding the glass into a cup of stainless steel when we're working that way, it's wonderful stuff. It's the stuff they actually use for the holding the metal and the glass insulators that you have in power pylons. So, you know, those are up there for decades supporting the electricity cables, and it's
UV,
incredibly resistant to UV. So we've had work in the outdoors now for almost 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years is the longest.
And we the only time people have taken pieces indoors is if they're going away from home for a very long time. But usually people just leave the pieces outside, and they're quite happy all year round.
We also are careful with the form in terms of not collecting the heat as well, aren't we? Did you mention that? Yeah.
Other question.
So this is Jerry and Gwen Paulson. If we could ask a question, please.
Sure. Hi.
So hi, and thank you very much. Really, really fascinating to see the two distinct styles and then the joint style. There's a property of glass where it becomes a mirror itself when you've got, you know, two sides coming together and they start to reflect light back and forth between the sides. And then you also intentionally mirror surfaces. So you have two different forms of mirror, if you will, in your quiver of artistic arrows. And if you can kind of talk about using one, using the other, what maybe metaphorically mirrors mean in your work and things along those lines, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, great. I'm glad you've asked that question, actually, because I'm really interested, and my work is really sort of about how the visible and invisible aspects of life combine. And so it's what you can and can't see. So for me, choosing to work with the mirror was about adding an extra dimension. So it's sort of metaphorically, it's about, you know, how big is the universe? What is going on that we don't know about? And so when the mirror is applied, and especially onto the, like you say, you've already got that internal reflection, it's creating dimensions which I didn't know that were there until I've actually done it. And it takes you to places that you're like, whoa, I didn't expect that to happen. So for me, that's a real excitement in every piece I make, because something happens that's beyond what I thought could happen. So it's about that idea that you've got all these elements and you bring them together, and the outcome can be something that you didn't know was going to happen. And I also chose mirror because it's very accessible to everyone, because every culture or religion has mirror, and that it's central to it in some way, and it has some sort of symbolic meaning. So and the fact that it absorbs the light, it just, I don't know.
And the Latin for
mirror is speculum, to speculate. So there were all of those things, and that was very early on. That was very, for me, yeah, this makes sense. And for me, I you know, the explorations with it could just be absolutely endless. And I think that's what keeps me experimenting with how I can use it, and whether you've got one plane and across another. I mean, sometimes we look at pieces and we're like, oh my gosh, did you see what's happened there? Like that contained perspective, you almost don't know yourself what's going on within the pieces that we've made. And that's, for me, that's just the beauty of it.
And you know,
I come down every morning and brush my hair.
But you know, if you go to say a tailor's or a clothes shop, and you have the flat mirror that you can look at yourself in, and then there's a mirror that hinges from the side, and as you bring it round, you get to the point where you have that infinite reflection going backwards and forwards. Now, one of the things with the collaborative work we love to play with, because the applied mirror is Sally's particular thing, but one of the things we love to play with is mixing the applied mirror surface with the internal reflection generation that you can do, which happens particularly effectively when you have two flat planes of glass. And so you not only do you get this doubling up of image, but you get the doubling up of the doubling of the image. And then you have these almost completely random images that get pulled in from somewhere. And sometimes you can be looking in a piece and it'll just be like, where's that being pulled in from? What is that image, or what is that light that's in there? And it's, as Sally was saying, it's the complete involvement that you then have with the piece as you're looking into it. And it's the way it draws you in, and it draws the light in and throws it back out at you. It's just quite magical.
Does that kind of answer?
Yes, thank you very much.
Some of their work reminds me of the crystals that form in my Admiral Fitzroy weather predicting glass.
Okay.
Yeah, when you, especially when you're working geometrically and you get that multiple imaging, it's, yeah, I can see that completely.
I've got mine here. Can you see it?
Says Mark very proudly.
Mine is in the shape of a cloud, so it's a little more abstract.
Well, that's very good. Mine's rather more commercial.
Sally, I also wondered about your exhibition in Sarre-Poitiers. Did they keep any of the work since?
Yes, they did. They kept one of the pieces called Converging Connections, which is on a Jesmonite base, and it has a top, so it's almost like if you're on silver service where the top can kind of come off, but it's quite large, and there's a mirror inside, so you can take it apart, and there's this mirror in there, but it's a flat mirror that I've applied to it.
I think you showed, didn't you show that? I mean, it was in one of the photographs.
It was in the
dark base.
It's in the middle
right?
of the video.
In the video, yes. And there were two of them, and they've kept one of those. And I think it was because it particularly spoke to them about how all of the connections, whether they're historic or in the present, all sort of come together to create the environment that Sarre's pottery is.
I can't say how it is a beautiful museum. The building is beautiful. Fabulous modern collection of glass with you know, all the people you probably expect to see, including Karen Lamont, and I think there's Lino, there's certainly Bricktober and Libensky.
Yeah, there's many amazing pieces there.
Have you got another question, Jerome?
Oh, there's some more messages which I'm meant to be watching.
Come on, Mark, do your job.
No, they're all thank yous and brilliant presentations. So you've got lots of them. Any more questions? Otherwise, perhaps I should conclude by saying, Richard and Sally, thank you very much indeed. For me, it's been a wonderful collaboration over 20 years, which I hope will continue. You become very close friends of me, my family, you know, and we've had a fabulous time together, and I hope long may that continue. I'd also like to thank all of you for coming, and in particular Diane and Linda for arranging it all. You've had to give up your lunch because I think it's sort of lunchtime, whereas all we've had to do is to give up our gin and tonic probably, or equivalent thereof, because it's sort of dinner time for the rest of us. And I think Richard, before we started, was desperately trying to turn the potatoes off or whatever. I'd just like to perhaps finally mention, there may be an opportunity next year for you to see Richard and Sally's work for real, because I'm in discussions with Brandy and Kristen at GAS about organizing a visit for a small number of people from the States to visit at the time of Collect, which is our big sort of craft exhibition, which takes place in February. And we're talking about having a special glass afternoon, and I'm sure Richard and Sally are going to have pieces in Collect. So that may be a good opportunity. And if you're interested, you should contact either Brandy or Kristen. So on that note, thank you, everybody. And I hope you've enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very much.